So it's my great privilege to announce this panel and our panelists. We're talking about federal state agricultural policy. And with us, we have the coolest cowgirl in the world over here again, Logan Brown. And we also have the Honorable Sid Miller. Sid's an 8th-generation farmer and rancher and the 12th commissioner of the Texas Department of Agriculture. He has a reputation as a staunch defender of Texas agriculture, which I can attest to as well as probably most of you in this room. And he's the state's strongest advocate for it. Texas-grown products, Texas-owned businesses. He's a businessman who breeds and trains his own American quarter horses, and in his very small amount of spare time, he's a recognized rodeo cowboy with 26 world championship titles. In addition to that, he and his wife have been married for 47 years. He has 2 sons, 2 daughter-in-laws, and 5 grandchildren. And I think that's an important part as we talk about the future, that both of these men here are fathers and are thinking about that as they move forward. Also with us is Walt Smith. He's the Hays County Commissioner, Precinct 4, covering Dripping Springs, Driftwood, and part of Buda. He's the county rep for West Travis County Public Utility Authority, founder and president of the Millard Group, CEO of the National Association of Agriculture and Food Policy, CFO of the National Association of Advancement for Animal Sciences, and he has 3 daughters as well. So let me kick it over to this panel to talk about this important subject.
Well, thank you both for joining us today. I know everybody is greatly looking forward to everything that you both have to say, so we'll kind of get down into the nitty-gritty. I don't think many introductions are needed for both of your backgrounds necessarily, but we'll kind of start county first, and then we'll get into the state side of things. So Walt, kind of get straight to it. What does Hays County ag life, what are you facing right now? What does that look like for y'all?
Well, I represent the fastest growing precinct and the fastest growing county in the U.S. And that means that we grew, with the last census, we grew 54% in a 10-year period. That's countywide. My precinct is growing about 20% a year. And so if you can imagine the conversion that's happening there, whenever I first ran and was elected in 2018, very rural precinct. One population center, now it's all a population center. The west side of the county I represent has grown. I was 28% overpopulation when redistricting occurred in 2020 for my precinct. So that means I grew exponentially more than anybody else. What I was very interested in the last panel, because one of the things that we're trying to do in Texas, we don't have planning and zoning authority at a county level. We really look at 5 things. We kind of fudge on getting our hook in there. Our county, I say this, we require a 6-acre lot minimum. And we do that because we do have control over septic rules. And so if you have a well and you have septic, we say you have to have at least 6 acres to have a lot. If you bring in your own water, or if you put in a package disposal plant, you can build houses every 45 foot, and we don't have control over that. So how can you incentivize development from a financial way, or from a financial standpoint, to try to curb that, to keep that rural aesthetic and rural lifestyle that it's the reason that we moved there, and that's what the deal is. So what we've done, we're going to be the first county in the state of Texas to actually implement a conservation development title and subdivision title into our rules and regs. It'll be adopted by the end of this year. But we did 2 what we call charrettes. They're really case studies on properties that were in direct line of development. These are ranches, one on the east side of 35, one on the west side of 35. We did a traditional development plan on them. For example, say 100 acres, 100 houses with all the infrastructure that goes into it. Developers, believe it or not, don't make money until the end of the project. I didn't know this whenever I got into this, but really you've got a 10-phase development. Those last 2 phases is whenever it starts to cash flow, right? All the infrastructure needs, all the financing that goes into that on the front end is really hard for them. So I looked at that process and said, what if we use public financing, and we call them PIDs, public improvement districts. We tell you, as long as you have at least 50 acres and you guarantee that half of it will be kept in green space, you can do sustainable farming on it, you can do livestock on it, you can do anything on it. And we request, you don't put in any wells on, and you use permeable pavement. You do those things, then the county will back a PID, a public improvement district, on top of that property, so they don't have to go to the regular market to borrow money. They can bond that money using the county's name and get it at such a lower rate that at the end of the day, they can do clustered housing. They can do, more dense development on the other side. It creates additional green space, but the developer themselves cash flow at the exact same rate they would with half as many houses. And so it's kind of an ingenuitive way to go about it, because we can't force anything. All we can do is try to financially incentivize. But before we've ever adopted those rules yet, there's already a half dozen developers, large-scale developers that operate nationwide, that are wanting to try to go through that process. Because at the end of the day, they sell fewer houses, but because of the amenities that go with it, that green space, the availability to be in the country, those homes are selling for 4 and 5 times what they would otherwise. So they still get a return on investment that they wouldn't see otherwise.
It's a really neat way of going about doing it, and I feel like it's a very forward-thinking process that you've laid out. So with kind of what you were talking about, I think one of the biggest things that people hear and what people are thinking of with the state of Texas right now is growth. And with growth comes great responsibility. It also comes with a ton of obstacles and challenges. What have you seen from the both of you with how much growth in population and magnitude and responsibility that Texas is facing right now? Either one of you both. Yeah.
Well, and Walt touched on this. I'm going to drill down a little deeper. What he's talking about is urban encroachment. We lose about a farm a day in this state. Now, to put this in perspective, at that rate, we're going to run out of land in about 700 years. So that's running out of land is not the problem. The problem is we're out of water, and he touched on that. The reason you have to have 6 acres is because there's not enough water. You can't develop it if you don't have the water. We have 1,600 new Texans every day. That's how fast we're growing. His area in the Golden Triangle, 70% of the growth is occurring. The problem with these 1,600 people that come every day, they don't bring any water with them, but they got to have it. So we're having in his part of the state and others developments that are shuttered. They can't put in these 800-900 houses. There's no water. They can't deliver the utilities, the county, the water district, the cities. We can't service you. We can't, you just can't. We can't expand anymore. So we're at that capacity. So we're having to do a lot of things to address that in this state. We finally woken up to it. We're one of the states where basically the state does not regulate groundwater. The state owns all the surface water, and we have river authorities that allocate that up and down the river sheds. We have the Trinity, the Brazos River Authority, Colorado, all of that, and they manage all that, but it's all allocated. There's no extra. So now we have to do a lot of things different, like infrastructure. We've got to improve our infrastructure. Our cities are losing 30% of the water. By the time they get it they deliver it to the customers, they lose 30% of it. We can't lose 30% of it. That's an easy, quick fix. We have to put in better delivery systems. We have to change our mind from stormwater drainage to rainwater catchment. Instead of paying millions and millions of dollars to get rid of stormwater, we need to capture that. We can capture it off of parking lots, distribution warehouses. It's relatively clean. We can use that. We've got to recycle our water treatment plant water. We don't have to drink it. That's kind of nasty, but my farmers sure would like to irrigate with it. Now we can use that. But we're not doing that. Made a trip to Israel. They don't waste a drop of water ever over there. It's all recycled over and over and over again. So there's a lot of things that we have to address on this problem. But our biggest problem is a water shortage. Our South Texas, the Rio Grande Valley, where we grow all of our vegetables, they usually grow 4 to 5, sometimes 6 crops. They grew 1. That's all the water they had. Mexico won't pay up on their water treaty. We lost our sugarcane industry in the valley. We closed the last sugarcane processing plant. Not enough water to grow the sugarcane. It's gone. If you're a sugarcane farmer, you're out. there is no hope for you. It's definitely gone. We pushed out 6,000 acres of citrus in the valley. We just can't, not enough water. So I've made this a priority. Donald Trump is now negotiating and making that part of the tariff talks with Mexico. He's cut off the water from the Colorado. We owe them water from the Colorado. They owe us water from the Rio Grande. So he's now using that for leverage. President Sheinbaum has sent a proposal. I haven't seen it to President Trump to pay their water debt. So hopefully they will. I just issued $280 million. We're taking applications for those farmers down in the Rio Grande Valley to try to keep them in business from going bankrupt. And hopefully we can get that in their hands and keep them going at least one more year until we can get some water. So my point is, water's the limiting factor.
We touched on this before we sat down with a couple of people in the room. The misconception is that Texas is out of water. I'm going to disagree. It's a geography problem. There's a lot of Texas that would love to get rid of the water that they have. It's all on the wrong side of the state, though. And if you look at, there's about 2 million acre feet in the Sabine that gets flushed out into the Gulf every year. You're talking about coastal encroachment. You're losing a lot of the delta and estuary down there, and there are a lot of environmental groups that are stringent environmental groups that would love to see that fresh water go somewhere other than in the Gulf. There are tons of municipalities and in those areas where we're talking about that growth that we would love to see that water come to us because we are in such dire straits. One of the other misconceptions, I think, is that whenever you talk about an aquifer, is that it's a bowl in the ground and that water stays there. And we had a discussion earlier that, where I live, it's all karst. And if you're not familiar with karst, it's like Swiss cheese underground, okay? We can't do aquifer storage. If we pump it, if we find a depression in the aquifer and we try to fill it up, we go back 2 days later and there's no water in it. It's a river under the ground. And so we don't have the ability to do some of those things that you might be able to do in the Panhandle or in other parts of the U.S. And so the transfer of that water is really, Commissioner Miller could not be more correct. I mean, where I'm at, the perception is that groundwater, all ag and exempt wells under groundwater districts under state law are considered exempt. So if you have your 10 acres and you want to put in a well and you want to build your house, you can do that. And there's not really any groundwater regulation over that. The problem is, at least in my area, is the water companies from not just locally, but you want to talk about a bad word in Austin these days, say Aqua. Aqua is a Pennsylvania-based company that has made, it's investor-owned, but their purpose is they go out and buy small water systems. Well, in my area, they own a minimum, I think, of 30-something water systems. Their average loss, to Commissioner Miller's point, in Hayes County, the systems that they own, their average loss is 37%. That means every 10 gallons they pull out of the ground, 3.7 gallons of it comes out of the ground and it never goes through a meter. But because of the financial structure around that and around those companies, they don't want to give up any meters, so they don't want to sell to a local entity. And on the books, the investment side of that, the return to investors, maintenance and operations is a cut to the bottom line. It's not considered M&O. So at the end of the day, they don't really see an economic incentive to invest in upgrading those systems. And we do have technology out there that would help tremendously. I think that, looking at the water bills that are moving through the state capitol right now, this is probably going to be the session of water. You're probably going to see, especially some of the stuff Senator Perry's working on, more water legislation this session than you've probably seen in 15, 20 years. And I think that's a direct result of people waking up. And not only rural Texas has been yelling we don't have water or there's water issues for decades, right? But whenever it hits those population centers and it starts hitting economically, where, to Commissioner Miller's point, you can't build a subdivision or you can't bring in that manufacturing facility, then people start standing up and looking. I mean, we were fortunate enough, I think, I will say fortunate enough to get Samsung to come to Texas, right? Massive investment, billions of dollars of investment. They were able to locate where they located because it was an old Alcoa site, and there's about 18 million acre feet of water under that site that they can access. If that water wasn't there, we wouldn't have those jobs, and we wouldn't have that economic infusion that we would have had otherwise.
Is there a remedy for Lake Travis yet?
There's not. I mean, rain, and that's it. I mean, the way that the LCRA system, and he's specifically talking about Lake Travis and the Highland Lakes in Central Texas, it was developed under the LCRA system, Lower Colorado River Authority, as holding facilities. Really, it was built, to your point, for the rice farmers and down in the southern part of the river. And over time, it's developed to the vast majority of that is now residential use in the more urbanized areas around Austin. And it's directly impacted. I mean, when I was a kid, we had almost 8 million acres of rice in Texas. If you remember ever driving through Katy or driving to Houston, it was all rice farms, right? I think last year, I may be wrong, but there was less than 100,000 acres of rice in Texas. 150. And it has ag policy. The 1996 Farm Bill had a lot to do with rice farming leaving Texas, but the biggest impact has been the lack of water. You can't grow a crop annually if you can't guarantee the water to grow it. So,
one of the things that we have done right on that watershed, to your point, and he mentioned it earlier, we do have high rainfall events occasionally, but that water just runs right out in the Gulf. We don't capture it. One bright spot in Texas water policy is that we built off-storage channel on the Colorado River in the rice producing area down there. So now when we do have one of those rare events where it's a high water event, we capture that water and we store it, for when we need it later. And actually we got down as low as 100,000 acres because we have that storage down there now. We're seeing our rice acreage build back up, and it's coming back. We've gone from 100 to 150,000 acres, and it continues to climb.
well, and that's good. The rice industry is a good example of how federal and state policies can impact things in ways that we don't really anticipate, right? The 1996 Farm Bill was called the Freedom to Farm Act, and it really set us up on a course. Under international trade law, we couldn't directly pay farmers to farm. We did that for a long time. We bought their crops. We told them this is how much you can produce and this is what you can produce. In 96, we said we're going to do away with that. We're going to tie direct payments to whoever owns the acreage, right? You can grow whatever you want. We're just going to pay you because you own, and this is very oversimplified, but we're going to pay you off of the acreage that you have. You're going to have base acres for that. It worked really well in a lot of crops. In Texas and rice, what people didn't realize was if you're a rice farm in Arkansas, you own the ground. And so you get to keep that payment. If you own a rice farm in Texas, generally at that time, about 60-70% of it, that rice acreage was owned from somebody who was in the oil and gas business who lived in Houston, but it was their family farm, and so they leased it out to a rice farmer, right? What they figured out was I can go hunt on that, I can do other things on that property, and I'm still going to get that payment. I don't have to give it to my rice farmer. It was all absentee farmers. And so what we saw was those property owners continue to get that payment, but they didn't want to deal with the rice farmer or give that payment to the actual farmer. And so therefore you saw a lot of that property go fallow, and they kept their water rights. They sold those water rights. There was an economic driver there that was never anticipated under those laws. And so one of the hardest things, at least in my view, I do federal agricultural policy in D.C. I've worked there for about 16 years on the Ag Committee and Ag Appropriations Committee at USDA. And it's those unintended consequences of legislation like that regionally that are really the most impactful whenever we talk about some of these issues. Is that fair? Yeah.
So we've talked a lot about, obviously, the water problem. And kind of one of the things that I want to be able to touch on, and obviously we're not going to be able to save the state of Texas water issues in the next 20 minutes that we have this panel, but what can be done as part of the process of a handshake from the state to the county level, whether it be reallocation or whether it be incentive to be able to build on your own land, or whether it be the cattle rancher that's got 3,000 acres, the Paluxy runs underneath. What part of the process can be done from the state to a local level to help a lot of those ranchers and farmers?
Well, we've already talked about infrastructure. There are grants out there on the state and federal level for cities and counties and water districts to improve those. Walt said that, the legislature is a water session this time, so there'll be more money poured into that. We have the Water Development Board, and they have $6 billion entrusted to them to fund water projects around the state, and it's an evergreen fund. It goes out, comes back in, reloan, comes back. So that'll probably be added to that this time. But we can do more things than that. We need to embrace desalinization. We have about 20 cities in Texas that are running on desal now. None of them are getting it out of the ocean. It's all brackish water. One comes to mind real close is Granbury. Those of you that live on the Brazos River know it's salty. You can't really irrigate out of it. You can irrigate a couple of years and then you ruin your field because your field's too salty. So Lake Granbury, you couldn't use the water out of it. So they put in a desal plant, and now they're able to use the water out of Lake Granbury. Big Springs has been on it 15 or 20 years. El Paso's been cleaning up brackish water. So that's one. The one bright spot is the oil and gas industry. They use tons of fresh water for fracking. They're getting away from that. About 30% of their water now is brackish water that they've cleaned up, not the drinking water quality, but quality that they can frack with. And they're recycling it. And they're using produced water too. So they're kind of leading the way on this. I'm very, very proud of that industry. We need to do, I mentioned earlier, rainwater harvesting, rainwater catchment. That can be used as is for irrigation or manufacturing in our cities. We've got the homeowner can do their part. Just water smart plants. Start planting Texas natives. Get away from these high water use St. Augustine grasses and things like that. There's a ton of things that we can do, and it's going to take all of them to solve our water needs. Just building more lakes, not going to solve it. That takes 50, 60 years if you can get all the permits and get through all the environmental concerns. It's really not a solution in the short term. So we're going to have to use all of these, all of the above to solve our water problems.
One of the things that if you've paid attention to the state legislature in Texas, like we said, this was the water session, right? Last session was the developer session. And I say that the changes in rules, I mentioned earlier that counties don't have planning and zoning rules. I will tell you that as a county commissioner, I don't want planning and zoning rules. I believe very, very, very specifically in private property rights. And I don't want to tell you whether you can have a purple door on your house or not if you are living on 1,000 acres in western Hays County. That's not my job. But what I do want is some what I would consider common sense, generalized planning and zoning authority for counties. And whenever I say that, it's, give us the ability to say, you know what, we want a 10-acre lot minimum. In Texas, we can't do that. Give us the ability to say, in this area, yes, you can have groundwater districts. Individual houses are exempt when it comes to water wells. I think that and agriculture are perfect. But if I have an individual house that's pumping 28,000 gallons a day, that's a problem. And I have those in my precinct, believe it or not. But whenever you see those, and I think the property owners at the end of the day, the value of those properties, we've been able to witness that the values of those properties grow exponentially compared to that condo unit with 300 condo units on 10 acres or 5 acres. The property values there skyrocket, so the local economy is benefited from it. But then but again, one of those unintended consequences, when you do a really good job of increasing property values and incentivizing, then our biggest problem is we don't have affordable housing. So we can have great restaurants and great businesses, but if you can't afford to live there to work in them, it makes it tough. So it's all a trade-off. I do think there are things that can be done, a few more authorities at a county level. Unfortunately, brethren, I have county commissioners and local officials who are brethren who have cut our throats by having immense overreach in their local areas. And so there's just not a level of trust in the State House and that there was 20 years ago in locally elected officials. And I mean, we have to own that as local officials. There's bad actors everywhere, but I believe that they've really hurt us in being able to get common sense changes in the State House, because we've had some of our, like I said, some other local officials really overreach where they should have been. But it's a problem we have to deal with. I think that's a fair assumption to say that, Commissioner, maybe not.
We don't have much time left. We've got about 10, 15 minutes left, so I wanted to be able to open it up to the audience for questions. I don't want to waste being able to have these two gentlemen up here and the knowledge that they have. So if you have a question in the audience, we'd love to be able to answer it now. Yes, sir.
It's Merlin again. Sorry about this. Sid, you may not remember this, but Trammell called you back in 2018 to come up and meet me because I was from Iowa. And the thing that I remember about our conversation, which I didn't believe at the time, but it was true, you impressed me by saying, Merlin, my ag budget is bigger than your entire state budget to run the state of Iowa.
That's true.
Yeah, and it's still true, I'm sure. But anyway, one of the things that you were passionate about was getting healthy food into your schools for your kids. We've made some advancements on that, and I'd love to connect with you and see how we could put our heads together. Walt, you're doing great stuff. I got to put an asterisk next to your common sense. I mean, where in the hell has that gone in this country? Hopefully we can find some more of it. Us old guys still have some of it because we got it beat into us by our parents. But anyway, Iowa and Texas, you're number 5. We're kind of number 2 in production. But we're launching a grassroots effort out of Iowa. It's really the whole ground level of everything that needs to happen in agriculture. I love this conversation. I love the state and federal policy things, because obviously that's got to change. While you guys are doing that, we need to change the consumer at the bottom and the players in the middle, because there are some bad actors there. But anyway, I want to connect with you both after this and see how we can put our heads together and build on what you guys are doing. Because quite frankly, I think I need to take Texas back to Iowa and teach some things that they have lost. So you're all invited to come back.
I would tell you a great advocate for that, and you mentioned the World Food Prize earlier. One of my, if you don't know who this is, do yourself a favor, go out and do 20 minutes of research this afternoon. Norman Borlaug is probably one of the best individuals who ever lived. And Norman Borlaug, who the World Food Prize is named after, he was actually Nobel Prize winner, father of the Green Revolution, from Iowa, became a good Aggie. I actually had Dr. Borlaug was a professor of mine at A&M, and in his later years, but great guy, but a strong Iowan.
So we'll bring you back to the World Food Prize. I got some connections there. Absolutely. If you'll come.
Do we have anybody else in the audience that has questions for these two gentlemen? No? Oh, here we go.
This is kind of I guess a broad question, but try to make it specific. If you could have in a bucket where you would put the most budget in terms of water security for all the needs, what would be the biggest bucket you would put money in?
Well, without a doubt, we'd immediately go to work on infrastructure. We can't be wasting 37% of our water. I mean, that's an easy fix, and it shames me, it disappoints me that we have to do that. We just haven't kept our infrastructure updated. We have, of course, I do all the economic development for 191 rural counties, and we have rural counties that still have cast iron water lines, galvanized water lines, and they're still dealing. Every time the ground shifts, those things burst. and they just patch them and keep going. But we got to get that system replaced.
Well, I would even, so in a previous life, I set up the Washington office for the National Rural Water Association. And we have problems here. I've seen active water systems in the Dakotas that are cedar pipe. I'm not joking. That are still being used today. And to the commissioner's point, I would say there's two buckets, and both of them involve infrastructure. Number one is the maintenance and upgrade of our existing infrastructure. That's huge. The second thing is large-scale transferability. Texas has done a great job with our electric grid in trying to get, the Rural Electrification Act in the 20s. They did a great job of getting electricity to everybody, right? They knew they needed it. We should be doing the same thing with water, because to the point I made earlier, there are places in our state that have a lot of water. There's aquifers on the eastern side of the state that go all the way into Louisiana that recharge on a daily basis, and some estimates are they have enough water for over 400 years for the state. I don't have 4 days where I'm at. Now, how can I get that water across? Now, that is a problem. Localized groundwater districts, and they don't want to see interbasin transferability. You've got large municipalities like Abilene and San Angelo that are literally out of water. They're not being able to build houses. They're not being able to, and that's just on the growth side. In 2 to 5 years, they're not going to be able to sustain the population they already have. And that's where the real problem's going to be. But I think you can, if you really look at large scale transferability of both groundwater and surface water, you could really improve the state in a very, it's not going to be easy, but in I would say 1 to 2 decades.
We appreciate you guys coming here. I saw a comedy skit about if we can move oil all across the country, why can't we move water? I looked at the Texas Water Plan. Has there been any talks about like an Interstate Highway Act of 1950s just to get water pipelines all the way across the country?
All talk. That's it.
Is there a government official or agency that we could try to push on, or?
I'll tell you this. As much as I would love to take water from Oklahoma or from Louisiana or anywhere else, the thought of them transferability means that pipe can go both ways, right? From a political standpoint, do you ever think that anyone in Texas is going to be willing to put a pipeline across a state line to do that?
Absolutely not.
I just don't think functionally there's so many, like, we're a right of capture state. You own the water under your property, at least up to a certain point. We're very different than especially those reclamation states to the west, and it is a very different situation. I don't see us being able to work with any other state in any type of water transferability.
Mr. Smith, I completely agree with everything that you're talking about, but I'd have to propose that there is a technology. You're using it today in your fracking. I helped introduce it. I built policy for Senator McCarthy to take the produce water of Bakersfield, California, and brought it here to Abilene, Texas, 8 years ago. It's cleaned up billions and billions of gallons of water. My company, Electro Aeration, if you drink out of that little water dispenser there, has helped with rice farms. I've helped increase rice by 15%, and this year we're helping reduce the methane to help monetize the value of cleaning up the methane. The question there about the 37% that's going, is that evapotranspiration or is it just lost through the lines that are clogged up?
I can tell you in the system that I was talking about, it's all line loss.
Okay.
It's all line loss. I mean,
Well,
you're talking systems that are at a minimum 40 to 50 years old.
Yeah, I spoke to the Mayor Marlin about this, about doing plug-in systems that are there at the point source versus having to spend $3 to $5 million for a new infrastructure. That's that technology. It's not just a water dispenser. I'll show you the actual proof of it, okay? It helps you be able to move the water faster, but clean up those lines. Now, in terms of moving water cross country, I'm looking at doing it on the website H2 Highway,
Is this a question?
H2 Rail. It is available to bring cross country. Love to have Texas help us.
And we can take that offline. We've got one last question in the back, and then we'll
Cool.
wrap it up.
Yep. There's a lot of talk about a manufacturing revival, and I'm interested in agricultural manufacturing. Is there any incentives or programs or projects that y'all are aware of going in?
We do rural economic development. We have different grants. You can go to our website, texasagriculture.gov, click on grants and programs, and scroll through there. We will pay up to $25,000 to a community for each new job that creates. So manufacturing would definitely fall under that. We have other grants to bring in infrastructure, roads, bridges, water, sewer lines, et cetera. So yeah, we partner a lot with the rural parts of the state and to make that happen.
There's also local and federal incentivization programs. At a localized level, if you can show those jobs and you can show that economic drive, the biggest tax you're going to pay in Texas is your property tax in general. Locals can do what are called 381 agreements to abate sales taxes, those kind of things to get those businesses off the ground. At the federal level, one of the issues that we have, especially through the Department of Agriculture, there's great rural development programs out there that specifically target manufacturing, production, job creation, those kind of things. The problem that we find, especially in these high growth areas, is they're specifically set with population and income level limits on those federal programs, that in these high value areas or where you're seeing this encroachment, number one, the population's growing too quickly. You cast out the program because you have too much population, or number two, because you are bringing in high paying jobs and you're incentivizing, a higher income level, then you completely blow out of the water the finance cap. They want to target those programs to low income areas. So it's a problem that we've looked at through the Department of Agriculture, the federal Department of Agriculture, USDA, for quite a while, because it really puts, especially as an infrastructure example, there's a little water system in Williamson County, Texas, called the Schwertner Water System. It's 2 miles from Dell. Do you think that they could qualify for the headquarters for Dell? It was a broke water system, and we couldn't get federal funding for them because the population was like 500,000 in the county, but it was in a rural part of the county, and the average household income there was 120,000 because they were next door to the Dell headquarters. You can't qualify for anything like that, but that system failed because of it.
Well, what a tangled web we weave. There's a lot of grassroots work that needs to be done. There's a lot of state work that needs to be done, legislative work that needs to be done, a lot of things that are in the process right now that we all kind of need to put our foot into and make sure that we're doing our part and do the groundwork for, not just for the state of Texas, but for the U.S. as a whole. We are so grateful to get to have both of you up here and get to learn from you and get to chat with you, and for the audience to get to hear your perspective and hear your thoughts on things and get to hear kind of an inside look of where Texas legislature is going. So we appreciate it. We appreciate all of you for coming, and we're grateful to be here.
Thank you again.